Hey everyone, and welcome back to video number 5 on our Python backend series. Last time we added a secure login to our API, but today we're taking our API public. We're going to deploy our Flask app online using some free tools and optionally make it secure with .env files. So we're going to be learning how to push our Flask app to GitHub using Visual Studio Code, deploy it to render with gunicorn. I think that's how you pronounce it. I don't know. We'll also use Postman to test live endpoints and prevent unauthorized access to any of our public routes. As I mentioned, we're going to be using a couple of free tools. The first tool we'll be using is GitHub. This is something that every programmer should already have. If you don't have a GitHub account, today's the day to make one. We're also going to be using Render in order to host our API online for free. So before we actually get to upload our API to the web, I would double check your version of the API. And if you want to grab mine from the description below from my GitHub pages, feel free to do so. But I would double check what you would like people to be able to do. If you really don't want people to be able to post to your products, you might want to comment it off or remove it. Same thing with the register and logging in. It's totally up to you. For mine, I'm just going to kind of leave everything open for testing purposes. So while we've been working on our Python project, we've kind of just been focusing on this app.py. We even have our database, but when we're using source control, we are going to need access and modifications to the folder. So the way that we can open and interact with folders is we can go to File at the top of our Visual Studio Code. We're then going to go to the Open folder. I already have mine selected here. You'll just need to navigate to where it is. So for me, it's in the Python folder, Python backend example, and open. Now you'll see that we actually have our folder on the left side, and we can even just open up any of these and view them in real time. Because we don't have the database, extension or whatever, we can't view it, but we can see we do have our original Python file here. And as we continue to add or modify any of these files, we'll be able to kind of see everything on the left side. So we're going to be creating a new file, and I would suggest using either the terminal. I like to use the kind of terminal on Visual Studio Code. I think it's pretty easy. And we're going to run a command in order to build out the requirements.txt for us. And I'll even show you how to edit it just in case yours doesn't have all the requirements that we want. So what you'll do is pip, or if you're on a Mac or using Python 3, pip3 freeze. Then we're going to kind of use the greater than symbol. We're going to type requirements.txt. We're going to hit return. It'll think for a second, and now you'll see in the left side of our screen here, we have a requirements text file. We can click on it and we can see all the different requirements that we have for our application here. And although we have tons of these requirements, and it's great that we can kind of auto create them, we only kind of need a couple. So it's up to you if you want to keep all of these. Otherwise, make sure it has Flask, and we can see that we do have Flask. And if it doesn't have the gunicorn, apologies if I'm not saying that right, we're going to add it here. We'll have a double equal sign, and we're going to do 21.2.0. So this is for deployment on things like Render. If you are planning on using an env file and you're adding an API key and things like that, you can also include python-.env. And I believe that one would be double equal sign 1.1.0. But you can see that because I've installed it and I've used it for other things, it is within the requirements. So you might want to keep all of these things here, or you can just have the Flask, gunicorn, and that optional DNV. So I am just going to get rid of everything besides the two that I want. We shouldn't need to add things like hashlib or functional tools. All right, next we're going to create a new file within our project. So I'm going to either right click, or you can press the little file button up here. We'll do new file, and we're going to call it Procfile with a capital P. So capital P, R-O-C-F-I-L-E. And we're just going to hit return. We don't want to have an extension. And within this file here, we're going to include the keyword web, gunicorn, and we'll put app, app. So basically the web tells Render to run this as a web service. The gunicorn is a production ready server, and the app is basically our file name. So that Flask instance, the app.py, which equals that app of the Flask in the name that we have within our Python file right over here. Let's go ahead and save that and save any changes that we have made. So we should have our Python app, our products.db, that is actually something that is optional, but we've built it. Let's go ahead and use it. We also have our requirements, our Procfile, and optionally, you can also add a readme file. So what I would do is create another file here, call it readme.md for Markdown. And this is where you can include some information for your GitHub page or for users using your API. Totally up to you. It's very optional. Okay, our next step is to push to GitHub. I like to use the source control tools available on Visual Studio Code. You can also use GitHub Desktop. I'm also going to put a terminal command in order to push to GitHub if you'd like. Otherwise, the source control is super easy. So on the source control tab, you should have a couple options. There should be a publish to GitHub and there should be a initialize. I think my recording skipped over the initialization. I chose that one. And we can see that we have the different changes that we can commit. We can also see the green, all these different keywords to kind of show all of these different files. Let's go ahead and commit our changes. Let's go ahead and stage it. If you want to, you can select this as always. We want to enter the commit message. So I'll say creating repo, and let's go ahead and add the check mark. Let's go ahead and save. The next thing we'll want to do is we'll want to publish our branch. We want to put it on GitHub. So I'm going to press this next button here. And we can see that we have published to GitHub private or to public. So if you're me and you're doing a teaching or YouTube tutorial, right, the recommendation I'd have is public. For yourself, if you're doing client work, API keys, you have secrets, my recommendation would to be a private repository. If you also want to test it before going public, and this is something you can change, you might want to do a private and then make it public later. Okay, and because I'm already signed in on GitHub and connected, we can see here in the bottom right, hopefully my camera isn't blocking it, successfully published the repo to GitHub, and we can also open it on GitHub. My camera's probably blocking something. Okay, and we can see our repo here, and it has my little message of creating the repo. We have our Procfile, Readme, our Python products. Great. If you do want to update your settings here, because again, it's public, we can go to the settings tab. We can scroll all the way down to the bottom in the danger zone. We can also change the visibility. So currently it's public. If we wanted to make it private or vice versa, we can manage that there. All right, next step, which is the main portion of this video, other than putting things to GitHub, is let's actually use Render to test out this API in real time. So I would suggest hopping on over in a new tab and going to render.com. We'll be using the completely free version. And the only thing is, if you get a ton of API calls, it will kind of throttle you, but there is no fee for having a lot of API calls. It just might get a little bit slow. If you do want to use, this as a production for like an actual app where you intend to have a lot of users, there are some paid options, but we don't need to worry about that today. So you can see we have the get started for free option. I've already created an account. Something I'd recommend doing is actually just linking it with your GitHub account to begin with. I found that to be easy. You can of course just use an email if you'd like. So once you're signed in, we're going to want to use the web services, and we'll choose new web service. Here we can see the Git repository, and we'll want to configure our Git provider to give Render the permissions to access repositories. This should bring up this little pop-up window. And what I would do is, if you really want to, you can give it access to all your repositories. Otherwise, you can do the only select repositories, and we can go ahead and search for our Python backend example here. And you can even see what these permissions are. All right, let's go ahead and install that. You might just need an authentication code. Once you've put in the authentication code, it should redirect you to this little workspace. We can even view the repo if we'd like. And we want to then configure our API. So what name do we want? A unique name for your web service. So Python backend example, ndcyt, that should be pretty unique. You can also choose to create a project. They basically allow you to group resources into environments so they can better manage any related resources. We're pretty basic today, so I'm just going to opt not to create the project, but you can of course explore it. We have our region as well. So if EU, Southeast Asia, US, etc. There's also the optional root directory. So if you do want to have commands from a separate directory instead of the repository root, totally up to you. I would just leave it blank for us today. And we also have the build command. So here we have the pip install, and we're going to make sure that we install those requirements.txt, which is why we created that text file earlier, and the start command, which is going to allow us to boot that Python Flask app. All right, and the instance type, we are going to do free. That's totally fine. I don't want to have to pay for anything, right? It might be a little bit slow, but we're not making any huge calls, right? We have a little bit of a JSON file. We're going to be testing, the login and things like that. Free is totally fine for our purposes today. And here we have the environment values. We can set specific config secrets, so those API keys, and then read those values from your code. Let's go ahead and deploy our web service. So we can even see here, our free instance will spin down, which can delay requests by 50 seconds or more. Totally fine. We're just using this for testing right now anyway. And if you are creating this for an app and you do notice there's a delay and you need to fix it, you can always upgrade or find a different service provider. I had to take a phone call, so I missed the kind of like building in the terminal. Kind of sad. But we can see if we scroll down to the bottom, our service is indeed live. Hooray! That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about what just happened, because we have so many lines in our log. Our requirements installed perfectly. The gunicorn app ran without any errors. Our app bound correctly to Render's dynamic port, which is this 0.0.0.0 : 10,000. Yeah, I think that's 10,000. And we received the live HTTP response of 200 right here, which means our app is responding. So what are our next steps? Let's go ahead and grab our live URL from the render dashboard. It should kind of be like your app name.onrender.on.com. So we can see right here, we can copy it to clipboard, and we can either test it in our browsers, or let's go ahead and use Postman. It's been our friend for this journey. I really like Postman. So we're going to hop back into Visual Studio Code. Let's open up our Postman extension, or if you're using the Postman app. Alrighty, let's make a new HTTP request. And in the URL, let's go ahead and paste that back and on render. We're going to send a GET request. We've sent it, and look at our message. Hello from our first Flask server. Feels like just yesterday we've created our baby of an API. Let's go ahead and do the slash, and we can do products here. And let's go ahead and send that request. Awesome. And in our body, we can see our headphones, microphone, microfiber cloth. Amazing. Oh, I'm so happy that this worked out. Let's go ahead and post. And if we remember with our post, we should go to the body here. We're going to do raw JSON. All right, let's go ahead and try to add something. So we'll add our squiggly brackets. We need to give it a name. Let's go ahead and have this be, what do we want to add today? Maybe we can also sell phone charger. Add a comma, and we need to add a price. And let's make this $10.99. It's expensive phone charger, but maybe, 4-in-1 or something. Let's go ahead and send this. 201 created. Okay. Let's go ahead and get our products. Send. Now it might take a minute to kind of update with our product. There we go. Phone charger added at the end. Maybe it was there and I was looking over here and I didn't actually see it. But we can see our phone charger. So this is a live online API. We have done it. Feel proud of yourselves for making it this far. We now have an API that exists on the internet. One other thing we can try is to log in. So let's do our post. I believe we had register. Let's do raw, JSON. All right, what did we have for this? I believe it was username, or is it user? We created the code. Let's go ahead and check it out because I have a memory of a goldfish sometimes. All right, so register username password. Okay, so username, I'll have it just be NDC. Oh, it needs to be a string value, of course, comma, and then password. I'm not telling you, I don't want to leak my password. Oh my goodness. Go ahead and send that request. 201 created. Let's try to log in. Send. Status okay. Let's try to log in with a bad password. Send unauthorized. Woohoo! So we can see that all of our different functions and pages still work. That's awesome. As a little bit of a bonus tip, You can add a health or status endpoint for any uptime monitors. You can also log request errors for debugging, and you can also consider enabling CORS headers if you'll connect them from a front end later. Otherwise, we've pretty much accomplished the goal of the video, but I do want to kind of talk about a couple bonuses. First bonus I'd like to talk about is the Readme file. When we're working with Markdown, there's a lot you can do. I like to kind of start off with this hashtag for my title, and we can call it Python Backend API. Go to the next line, and I'll kind of use these dashes to kind of talk a little bit about what this API is used for. So we have user authentication. We have an SQL or SQLite database. We also have free deployment on render, products, adding, and viewing. You also kind of have like a double hashtag, what's inside, or like how to run locally, and git clone, right? They can kind of just include some instructions about how to use your API. And I like to also usually include what's a little bit about what it's like, because I also do YouTube. Sometimes I'll include like a little YouTube link. Yeah, so you can use any Markdown tools that you'd like. Oh, these dashes should definitely have some spaces, just so people can kind of have a little bit of a, README or like a quick glance of your API, and maybe even some commands on how to use it. Something we also might need to do is we can also push those source control changes to GitHub. So we see here we have the changes to README. We can go ahead and commit. Might want to also stage or click the always. So we'll need to include down here, the description of our changes. So I'll usually say like updated README file. Go ahead and press our check mark. Go ahead and save. And we can always sync these changes if we want, but we should be okay. API is live, it's public, anybody can use it, but what if we want to protect it with an API key? So we'll want to go to our render platform, and we'll want to go to our service name. So here's our Flask project that we've been using. And on the left sidebar here, we should have a manage tab with environment. We can do the add environment variables here, and we'll do the from.env. And we can paste our env contents to add multiple environmental variables at once. So let's go to Visual Studio Code. Let's go back to our Explorer, create a new file, and we'll just call it .env, nothing else. So what are we gonna have for our API key? We can call it like products API if we want. Otherwise, we'll just do API underscore token, and we'll have it equal, let's do super secret token. Your token should probably be a little bit more secure than this, but let's go ahead and copy. We'll also save. We'll go to our env and we'll paste it in here, and we can add the variable, or you can choose to upload a file. As a reminder, if you're looking for your file in Finder, it may be hidden, and I believe the command was shift command period. And you can see that we have our .env file here. And on Windows, you should be able to just, from the selection, enable to view hidden files. Okay, let's go ahead and add those variables. Because I'm sharing this publicly, normally I would blur out any API keys. You never want to share those with anybody else. In our Visual Studio Code, let's go to our app.py. Let's scroll to the top, and we're going to go ahead and import OS for the operating system. And you should also import .env, spelt out .env as well. I'd also go to our requirements, and I would add python-dotenv equals 1.1.0. Go ahead and save that. We'll then add our API token, so API underscore token, and it'll equals os.getEnv, and then we're going to put in the API underscore token. We're going to look for that parameter of API token here. And in order to require a token for sensitive routes, let's say we want to protect the post products or any other future routes, we'll need to add the @required token. Let's go ahead and create a function to kind of require that API key. So we'll create a function with the def keyword, and we'll call it require underscore token. And within the brackets, we're just going to include the letter F. We'll add our colon, and here we're going to do @wraps. We're going to pass through F. Then we're going to create another function, so a function within the function of the decorated underscore function. And within the brackets, we're going to do asterisk args, comma, double asterisk kwargs. we'll add our colon. So essentially this is meant to be a route protection function, and when applied to the endpoint, so we'll use like a @required token, it's going to check for a valid token and we'll look for an authorization header. However, this function is currently incomplete and we need to finish it like so. In our function, we're going to establish a token, and let's have this equal the request.headers.get. And we're going to look for the authorization header here. We'll go to the next line and we'll say if token, and we want to look for something that it doesn't equal to. We're going to use the exclamation point equal, which is our does not equal key. We'll do the F, add our string, bearer, and then with our squiggly JSON brackets, API underscore token. Outside of that, we'll add a colon. And we'll go ahead and return. We basically, if we don't find that correct API token, we'll tell the people JSONify with a little error here. Unauthorized. We'll also want to return an error code to them. So we'll do comma 401, which is the unauthorization code. We'll go to the next line and return. So if we're not in that if statement, we'll do our F, and then the comma will do -args, comma, double asterisk, KWARGS. And then one more return out here, which is going to be our decorated function. Okay, now that we kind of have this set up, let's go ahead and scroll down to our post command. So adding new products, and let's go ahead and protect this. And we can do that because we've already established our kind of function, and we'll do the @require underscore token. So now our post products route is protected by an API token check using a decorator. Any request must include the correct header. So let's go ahead and save. So for the import of the .env, you might notice that it is kind of grayed out. If you're not using it locally like we did in the previous API key video, you can also just remove it. But for testing locally, you can keep it here. The next thing we'll want to be adding is another new file here, and we're going to be creating a .gitignore. Within our .gitignore, this is all the things we want GitHub to kind of ignore, and this is really important for our sensitive keys. If you want to ignore your SQLite database or any other local only files, and maybe any IDE clutter. So the way we can do that is you can also kind of comment it out using the hashtag. So if we have like environment files, and then you'll do the .env. If you didn't want to include any cached files, you can do the *pyc. If you didn't want to include a specific file, so in this case, the products.db, you can include it in the gitignore like this. Because I'm using it as an example for this project, you can keep it if you want, totally up to you. So now that everything is saved, we'll go to our source control. Let's go ahead and commit. Let's go ahead and stage those, and I'll say, big update with gitignore and API key on post. Push and save our changes. Sorry, I do need to fix one of the imports here. I did it wrong. We're going to do from functools. Sorry about that. We're importing wraps. That should fix the error. You'll also want to just go to your source code and push the changes. Just as a note, whenever you do push those changes to and from GitHub, it will be updating, assuming you've set it up the correct way, to your API project here. And we can see here, when I did try to push it, it actually failed because of the wraps import. Now that that's been fixed, let's go ahead and manually deploy and deploy the latest commit. All right, and we can see here, awaiting build logs. Oh, this time I'll be, able to see it in real time. I was adding a couple things in the background, just making sure that it works. But now that we have our API key, we should have to pass through the token. All right, looks like we are good to go. Let's hop back into Visual Studio Code. We can see our service is live. Let's open up our good friend of Postman, new HTTP request, and we were changing the post. So it was the products. And whenever you're checking and using an API key, you can use the headers tab here. And we need a key and a value. If we look at our code here, our key is going to be this authorization. And if you want to copy and paste it or type it, totally up to you. And then the value is going to be the bearer and then the API token key. So if we go here and we put bearer, and then we're going to include the name of our API key, which was super secret token, I believe. And now when we go to our body, let's do a raw JSON. Let's go ahead and add something else. Let's do name. Maybe we'll do CPU. and a comma, and we'll add a price. Maybe this CPU costs 199.99. So we have our request 201 created. Let's make sure that our API key works, so we can either disable it, or how about we mess up the API key and we just put, wrong key. Now in our body, let's change this to be PSU with power supply, put 299, and we send it. We get a 401 unauthorized because our API key is incorrect. So if we look back at our code, right, we kind of had this required token. And then when we're posting new products, we require that token, which is that API key, which we've uploaded / added to the environments tab on our render project. So congratulations, you have created and uploaded and publicly shared, or you can share it privately, your first API. For the last portion of our backend series, we're going to be connecting it to a web app as well as a mobile app. So we'll be using SwiftUI and Xcode for that, but a lot of the principles are super universal. So if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and drop me a like. If you ran into any roadblock or you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the series. Otherwise, dream big, code bigger, and we will see you in the next one.